I would awake and find myself in the state of being most conducive to launch an out-of-body astral projection. I don't actively practice astral projections anymore. They would be categorized as thrill-seeking, so very much a personal, created, self-driven want, and too much focus on the personal self and what it wants, chasing emotionally driven goals and ideas, and reflective cause and effect experience will be predominantly of a created personal nature. Overall experience far more limited then, as astral emotional ideas would limit the individual's awareness to the physical astral, unable to recognize anything beyond these life levels, and awareness would be restricted to them even on transition. When it comes to projecting the bodies, generally it would be the astral body that is projected, as most would have no awareness or recognition of the other vehicles, and as such activity stems from the chasing of thrills, emotional astral self, it makes sense that it is the astral body projected. Presumably, any vehicle can be projected in this fashion, the mental and ethereal, etc. But if you had no awareness and recognition of these parts of the created self and levels they reside on, you would be unable to perceive anything. With awareness and recognition, it is likely that projections of the other vehicles besides the astral can be achieved, and connecting to the real self, and less so entertaining the drives of the personal self, will have our real intent recognized, and so we will demonstrate more so a state of being and an unfolding experience that is not based on the personal self and the astral emotional component of it. Generally then, we will no longer seek the urge to project the bodies, as the experiences are far more limited than real side experiences, and the real guides will put a stop to such excursions as they can cause holes in the aura, can create portals for entities to utilize, or whatever else might be lurking around. Or the cord can be severed, and we may be trapped in wherever we projected to. The real guides can't interfere with the free will of an individual, so it's very much a decision agreed to by the real self of the individual, and the personal self may be the last to know. But the personal self can override it all if it is persistent. Each individual decides, even if the choices they make are not very conducive to awareness, or make no sense with the whole of life. But sometimes I wake and find myself in the perfect state for a projection. Is it personal self-driven? Maybe to an extent, but more so a situation I had effected through the real self. As in recent months, a few astral projections have revealed interesting information, and everything is experience after all, and every experience can assist in our recognition of the all is through comparison. An astral projection of the personal self and creation compared with real side experiences with the real self and the real guides, and there is a distinct comparable difference between the two. So I start off at point 0, the house I projected from, and out onto my street I go, and as I have found on the astral of late, if I happen to project, it's very gloomy, a kind of darkness, like a black mist, which limits astral vehicle visibility. This I have taken as evidence of the demise of the simulator, due to the overall agreement to ideas that are of a restricting, controlling nature. Such agreements reflected as the overall effect of a deterioration, and ultimately an implosion, should things continue along these lines. Sometimes there are entities in this blackness encroaching into areas of the astral they would never once be able to, but not on this occasion. I suspect it's my awareness that allows me to see this blackness, and were I to have projected with no awareness or connection to my real self, if it was a personal self-only view, then I'd be looking through the filters of the personal created self. Without awareness and recognition, people will still experience the effects of the ideas of restriction they agree to, but are unable to see through the marketed fronts of these ideas that represent control. Literalized people cannot see through their own programmed literalism. It's as though filters of the physical astral self always stand in their way, and even though the demise around them is undeniable, individuals can still think everything's fine. They can't see the wood for the trees. A matrix of programmed deception clouds what's really taking place, and the world, if seen through unprogrammed minds and eyes, would look far worse than it appears. The world actually is smogged in a black gungy cloud, and only those not programmed can see it in this way on the physical level. Those that can see it as it actually is are generally aliens and such, who fly by a black, inky mass that is the earth, that would look blue and green to the earth inhabitants, but going on the real side, creation from the perspective and view of the real self will reveal this to be the case also. This would be the case on the astral also, I would suggest. Astral adventurers with no connection to the real self and awareness would not see this encroaching darkness. Anyway, I wandered to the boundary of my astral starting area. You tend to recreate where you project from, and if you move beyond a certain invisible line, you can find yourself anywhere on the astral. For me, it is the house and most of the street, and as I go beyond the boundary that the street represents, I found myself walking besides a large ancient castle. It looked somewhat like the kind you might expect to find Dracula lurking within, although it reminded me a little of that fortress where a group and I were battling monsters inside of, on a previously recounted real-side experience. And I actually saw representations of aspects of my created self, agreements and attachments laying outside the fortress. The battling monsters experience was when I and a group were removing old taplines, demonstrated by the slaying of beasties in a fortress, the fortress representing all the old taplining agreements, a collective fortress of our group's agreements, and the impression of age that the fortress suggested indicated the age of these taplines, maybe ones agreed with and maintained to this day from thousands of years ago. On that experience, we entered the fortress of our old taplines, the monsters very big and scary, the old agreements compounded and made more so by millions of lifetimes of their maintenance, and undoubtedly added to with other emotionally charged ideas that reinforced them, and I'm sure the influence was very instrumental in encouraging the maintenance and cementing of them throughout the eons. But here a few of my agreements were outside the fortress, and just remnants. They seemed broken, like old mechanical toys that worked no longer. My agreements were all broken, what remained of them, and ejected from the fortress, and laying in plain sight. These were the old agreements that had been revealed then, exposed, examined, and a decision to destroy them made, and here they laid. The personal created self is the sum of its parts, or the culmination of its agreements, but usually the agreements are unconscious and unreachable by the personal self. They are locked in our unreachable fortress, you might say. With awareness and connection to the real self, we penetrate the fortress and lay waste to the taplines, if we do so decide. That which makes the personal self is still there, in the Akashic records of itself in the causal part, but we are conscious of the agreements now, and even as we break them, the evidence of their presence, as once they featured in the effecting of our experience, remains, except now they are broken things, and are excluded from the fortress. The agreements are no longer unconsciously concealed in the fortress of the self, or in full working order. On that previous experience in the fortress, a personal attitude caused the tapline removing adventure to cease. It was tantamount to a decision to stop. With intent and focus, despite our personal self-shortcomings, we always can pick ourselves up and try again, because the real intent is recognized and embraced, and the journey to recognizing the is continues. And it suggests here that I must have returned to this fortress and continued on with the tapline removing with my group. I didn't view the return to the fortress experience and monster slaying the second time, but everything's always going on in every new moment. Our real side activities also, and we just happen to focus in on a certain one each night, plucking a real side adventure from the everything all is pot of adventures.